Here he is.
Jeopardy. There he is coming up.
In his orange jumpsuit, in his orange prison jumpsuit, we are seeing Luigi Mangione. This is the first time he has returned to New York since the crime of which he is accused, and that is the murder of an insurance company executive. You can see that he has his hands cuffed. He comes here from Blair County Courthouse in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. In his appearance there with his lawyer, he was described as attentive, animated, smiling, engaged, and it was there that he agreed ultimately to be extradited directly to New York. His lawyer, Thomas Dickey, said, you know, we are cooperating. We're going to move forward and having a fulsome defense of our client. Would you anticipate that Thomas Dickey would remain a part of this case? We've talked about the folks who are going to be taking it over essentially here in New York. Would he stick to the Pennsylvania case? What happens now in terms of his legal representation?
I believe we will not be seeing much of Thomas Dickey going forward. He's an attorney. He's got a great reputation in Altoona, Pennsylvania. But that case is essentially on pause indefinitely. You're going to want Luigi Mangione did exactly what I would expect him to do. He found a high-powered attorney here in New York that knows Manhattan and knows procedure in state court very, very well. Thomas Dickey will be of no help, and that's not a dig on him. Someone who practices routinely in a completely different jurisdiction, especially if they're not admitted to practice in New York, and I don't believe he is, would not be much help to the Friedman-Agnifilo team, who are really just built in a laboratory for this kind of criminal defense. I mean, experience in the Manhattan DA's office, experience with criminal defense, experience as a federal prosecutor in the form of her husband. So he's gotten the best legal team he can get in New York. He doesn't really need an Altoona, Pennsylvania lawyer. Dickey will be great for the case as it exists in Pennsylvania, but I don't expect we'll see him again.
And there you saw the doors beginning to close on the NYPD police van as Luigi Mangione makes the short ride over to the courthouse, which is where we find NBC's Aaron McLaughlin outside that courthouse in Manhattan. What's the latest where you are, Aaron?
Well, Chris, right now, outside of the federal courthouse here in New York City, there's a very large media presence, as you can see behind me, media waiting for the arrival of Luigi Mangione. We do understand that he has arrived at the helipad not far from here. He's going to be driven in a convoy to the courthouse where he will appear before a federal judge. We understand that it will be a federal hearing today. He now faces 4 federal charges. That complaint unsealed just a short while ago. Federal counts including 2 counts of stalking, murder through use of a firearm, as well as firearms offense. This in addition to the 11 state charges that he faces, including murder in the first degree with furtherance of terrorism. Unclear when he will be arraigned on those charges. Last night we heard from his lawyer in the form of a statement responding to reports of these additional federal charges. In that statement saying, quote, the federal government's reported decision to pile on top of an already overcharged first-degree murder and state terror case is highly unusual and raises questions, constitutional and statutory double jeopardy concerns. We are ready to fight these charges in whatever court they are brought. Again, Luigi Mangione has arrived here in New York City, and very shortly he's expected to appear before a federal judge in the courthouse behind me. Chris.
Aaron, keep us posted. Obviously, a lot of attention around that courthouse right now. I want to go to Lisa Rubin now as well, who is downtown. Highly unusual and double jeopardy, 2 key lines from the attorney for Luigi Mangione. What can you tell us about that, and why would this potentially be a case of double jeopardy?
Well, Chris, from the outset, I can understand why Karen Friedman-Agnifilo would say that this is potentially a case of double jeopardy just by comparing the 2 instruments here. So, for example, One of the 4 federal charges here accuses Luigi Mangione of possessing a firearm with a silencer and a muffler. If you go then to look at the criminal indictment in Manhattan Criminal Court, there is a charge that almost identical, a charge that accuses him of possessing a silencer in violation of New York state law. So there is definitely some overlap between the charges here, where the elements of the crime don't appear to be so dissimilar that he could be charged with the same things. On the other hand, there are some differences here in some of the charges. Obviously, the highest charge in the state indictment is this murder in the first degree charge, which is, as you know, one that you can bring if the alleged crime is in furtherance of terrorism. And we've discussed on our air how the terrorism charge is going to be a real challenge for the Manhattan District Attorney's Office because there is a difference in court between intent and impact. Certainly the impact of the crime, particularly during the periods of time where Luigi Mangione could not be found, his name was not known, his identity was not anything that anyone could have guessed at the time, that had the effect of terrorizing people in Manhattan who may have viewed it as an isolated, random crime where the shooter is on the loose, right? But that doesn't mean that prosecutors can necessarily prove that Luigi Mangione had an intent to intimidate a broader civilian population. And there have been cases in New York State Court that have made it very clear that that terrorism charge is one to be used narrowly. For example, it could not be used in a case involving street gangs because the legislative history said it was really about terrorism as we understand terrorism conventionally. Things like 9/11, for example, as opposed to what Luigi Mangione is alleged to have done here. As to your question about how unusual it is to see 2 different jurisdictions almost simultaneously charging the same defendant, I think it speaks to the unusual nature of the crime here and how much both prosecutorial offices here that have jurisdiction, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office on one hand, the Department of Justice through the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York on the other, both of them very much want to be involved here. Is it unusual for both of them to sort of want to investigate the same crime? No, not at all. We often see situations where behind the scenes, both offices are investigating, and oftentimes where that lands is that one office will end up prosecuting a crime and the other one stands down. More often than not, it's the federal government that is allowed to go forward and the state government stands back, oftentimes because federal crimes carry more aggravated charges. They're perceived as being more serious. But here, I think what is unusual, as you noted, is that both offices are going at it almost simultaneously. And I want to point something out, Chris, to you and our viewers. When you look at that criminal complaint that was unsealed in federal court today, that was not signed today. It was signed yesterday. So you have a situation in which we found out about the criminal indictment from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office 2 days ago. Then yesterday, under seal, the Southern District of New York filed its criminal complaint to be unsealed today. They are basically sort of like dueling banjos of prosecutors here in terms of their efforts to prosecute Luigi Mangione.